Welcome to the second artist talk in a series featuring artists from Pink Progression Collaborations exhibit on view at the Arvada Center through November 8th. My name is Anna Kay. I'm a local artist and help to organize the exhibition. This show incorporates a fusion of narratives through collaborative artwork. These multidimensional works emphasize the collective issues that confront us and the transformational ways of finding common ground. 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment guaranteeing and protecting women's right to vote was ratified. This historic centennial offers us the opportunity to commemorate a milestone, recognize the consecutive dates in which all women attained the right to vote in America, and explore the complex struggle for universal suffrage today. Check out the work in person by making your free reservations to see the exhibit at the Arvada Center website. This exhibition is underwritten by Nancy Terry and Jody Steeves. A special thank you to our lead curator, exhibitions manager Emily Grace King, who's here with us today, director of galleries Colin Parson, and Arvada Center staff. Today, we are going to discover the fascinating collaborative and creative processes of amazing artists who are working in our local community. We are going to begin with artist Judy Anderson, known for her one-of-a-kind sculptural books and her mentorship of youth artists. Ginny Hoyle, who is a poet, freelance writer, and teacher. And Christopher Hecker also collaborated with them. He is a sculptor and teacher. They created the installation Warren World for our exhibition.
We actually started this project that some of it is being shown at the Arvada Center. Thank you so much, Emily, for that. Right after Trump was elected. And we were so horrified that we didn't know what to do. So what we thought we would do is try to celebrate the other rather than to demonize the other with the hatred that was going on. We worked on this project for 4 years, and actually it's still kind of moving forward because so many things have happened in the interim.
Yeah, I just want to say that Judy and I, for background, have been collaborating on installations and small edition artist books for 35 years. It's almost a staggering number. And this, each one has had its own energy, but this was a very special collaboration.
Judy and I got together and talked about how to approach what we did in response to the Trump hatred campaign that was going on. Little did we know how grand it would become. And I have this book, which you can see on the left. It's The Grammar of Ornament, which was published in 1868 by Owen Jones, when he traveled the world with artisans and documented the ornament of cultures around the world that people didn't have access to seeing. So we thought, let's just celebrate the cultures of the world as the beauty of what we all share, and kind of celebrate the other as being this wonderful, rich tradition.
Judy really was so intrigued with this book and just how much is conveyed in the beauty of these patterns and the color and the texture of these things. It reminds me of Darwin, this book, the way he has documented and collected these examples.
Ginny started writing and I started painting. We did research on different cultures, Turkmenistan. We didn't know what we were going to be doing, because we thought, well, maybe it would be an installation, it would be a book or something. But then I found this book of embroidery from Eastern Asia. It was gorgeous, just from Asia. And we thought the robe would be the perfect symbol for what we wanted to say, because a robe has the inside, which is really you, and the outside, which is happening from the environment or from the public. So we put together a series of sketches of different robes based on different cultures. So these are all coming from different cultures. This is an Aduet woman's robe that's filled with a garden.
You know, we were reacting to what was happening with the more than 40 or more than 60 million people who've lost their homes around the world due to, you know, greed and autocracy and drought and famine and war.
This one was really about greed, and greed more than, it's based on Manaford's ostrich jacket,
Yeah.
bomber jacket, but greed more, not just in the sense of money, but in the sense of not in my backyard. You know, if an immigrant comes in and they're going to get something, then that's going to be taken away from me. And that's like this kind of greed. Our ideas kept expanding as things got more out of control.
This jacket is actually rug stitched out of photocopied $100 bills. Can you talk about that, Judy?
Yeah, it's printed on rice paper. And then I shredded the rice paper and I hook rugged the jacket. So the inside, if you could see it open, if you've been to the show, is just this beautiful carpet of $100 bills. The outside, all the garments have poetry on the inside and the outside. So the outside has poetry about greed that Ginny wrote. And these poems some of them are also on the walls in the installation. When Ginny and I work, we're apart from each other. We create work, we get together and talk about what's in common, how to go forward, and then we just kind of keep going. At one point, Ginny said, I'd like to do something on healthcare, and at the end, we'll show you the Tyvek printed, poetry printed straitjacket. So I kept making all of these images. Ginny kept writing, and all of the writing on all of these garments is from Ginny, except for a quote from an African philosopher. We used a lot of images from the New York Times, but altered them enough that we could, I talked to a lawyer to make sure that we could use these. And the words are coming from the actual people for some of them. The eyes in the first slide were all the Rohingya women that had been raped. Not all of them, but they were the women, Rohingya women that were raped. I mean, the atrocities are just awful. You can see the Tyvek jacket there. That is a straitjacket that we were doing on the health one. At some point, we decided that we wanted to bring in our collaborator, this amazing man, Chris Hecker. And he had collaborated with us in our last exhibition that was at the Walker Galleries. And he's a sculptor. These are all the stands that he made to hold these sculptural artist books that were based on the female figure. They had words debossed out of them. So he started thinking about how he could bring the robes alive and give them a personality. Ginny, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, as opposed to just, you know, these robes. This is the first time Judy and I ever did a collaboration without a venue or a deadline. And so it was really freeing on the one hand, and at a time when so many of us felt unable to create or write. Christopher just did, these garments were pinned to the wall in Judy's studio, but his idea was to create these forms. So even if they're wall mounted, they are a little more animated, they're a little more dynamic, they create shadows, and he wanted to create some expression without, he was very explicit, he didn't want his work to interfere with what Judy had made.
So, he had said that he was making more armatures and not sculptures, yes, which exactly. Was interesting.
Yeah, and he adapted. I mean, he was, what a generous collaborator and what a wonderful person. I mean, when he's wearing that shirt that says "Be a nice human,"
he is a nice human.
He and his wife.
He also wanted to put a face on the forms so that when people were looking at it, they would see themselves reflected in the sculpture. So these are 4 of the 8 pieces. And
So I just want to interrupt to say you look and it's shiny, so you see your reflection. It's you, it's not you. And it puts you in that interface of looking in a stranger's eyes and how you recognize each other and don't see each other. Beautiful stuff.
it really started off from I am the other. We are the other. We are all the other. Some of the details. And we put some of the poetry on the wall. These are all 8 of the robes that are in this body of work. We didn't have enough space to put all of them in, but they're all out of paper or rice paper or Tyvek. The only other materials are threads and twine and some class. It kept us sane, as I'm sure all of you were kept sane by working in your studio when so many horrifying things were happening, coming from our country especially. Ginny, do you want to say anything?
It was so interesting how this evolved and how we played off each other. I mean, now we look at it and we can't even remember, was this your idea or my idea? It was really so beautiful how it just, it's the product of knowing each other a long time, but it was felt very safe and very satisfying and very engaging to work with Judy on this. And I really loved the experience, even though sometimes we wondered, why are we making this?
Do you have that one poem stripped? Do we have time it'll take you like a minute to read.
So the show is about clothing that protects and covers our naked body and expresses who we are and who we want to be in our culture. So then the sort of lead poem, which isn't in the show except in audio, talks about...
Except in audio. Okay, stripped. I was in a living room serving coffee naked, hunched over, hiding behind my bent arm, oddly unconcerned about the breeze on my ass. No one noticed, which is good, or else it's sad. Everyone was hunched over phones, sipping, reading, lost in thought. It was like being dropped into a party where you know at once you don't belong, and you can't find your ride, and you can't find the door, and frankly, you settle for finding a towel. Look, the sky is falling fire. More and more, I feel stripped of all the old illusions, don't you? More and more, it's 4 a.m. I lie awake, trying not to think. Mama said there'd be nights like this, but she never said what to take, where to hide, what to hum as the shells burst, and how to count, how to save all the broken children of the world. No sleep, the noise from the stars troubling.
Thank you,
That was
Judy.
really, powerful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I love that your installation incorporates art and poetry, which also reminds me of poet Rita Dev's quote, "Poetry is language at its most distilled and most powerful." There's also that saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and when you blend the visual with the poetry, it's worth so much more. Bonnie Ferrill Roman is known for her mixed media sculpture, installation, and digital photography, and she is an art educator. Her collaborator, Judy Gardner, is a mixed media artist, instructor at Regis University, and is obsessed with 3D printing. They created Pathogenic Logic for the exhibition.
This is the final piece that you can see in the Arvada Center. We decided to start at the end and then go back to the beginning to talk about how it all came together.
We were thinking about, it came out looking like we were talking about coronavirus, but what we were really talking about, because we started way last October before the virus was even a thing, was about ideas going viral in society. And about how you respond to things, whatever you're engaging with in your life is what goes viral in your life. And so there's like a Tibetan meditation practice called Tonglen, where you're like breathing in the suffering and the pain in the earth, and then breathing out love and harmony and beauty. And that's what we were really seeking to do with this piece, was to take all of that hurt and that angst and anger in the world and basically metamorphose it into an expression that would go viral in our lives by focusing on that, the light and the love and the harmony.
And then I will say that once we were doing the installation, as it got closer, and we realized, no, it's also about the virus, that affected some of the installation decisions and some of the decisions as we went. So
as we were,
as
we were working, it felt really creepy that, like all of those spiky balls were done before anybody had even talked about coronavirus. And it's like,
now there's all these images of spiky balls, and I'm like, well,
it is what it is.
These are some of a few different close-ups of different parts of it. One of the things we did is we crafted the installation so it looks as if these little guys are coming out of the tubes that we created. They're sort of being released and expanding into the space. Way back at the beginning, this is some of Judy's work.
Yeah, so this is what I was doing. I had been working with combining 3D printing and laser cut wood and other materials and some light, and just playing with what happened there, working with these sort of organic forms. And this is basically where I was.
And this is some of the work that I was doing prior to our collaboration, working a lot with installation, working with some similar forms to what ended up showing up in the installation, and definitely thinking in terms of a microcosm writ large. So cellular imagery and also imagery that has to do with the body as a metaphor for other states of mind and states of being. And then here is our pile of stuff when we first decided to get together and, okay, what's going to happen here? What do you got? What do I have? And we decided to bring some stuff together.
Pulling stuff out and putting it in a pile, and our sketchbooks got buried, and there was just like stuff coming off the walls and coming out of boxes, and just, it's like, what do we got and how do these forms play with each other?
So because we had already talked about this concept, and so then when the first time we got together, we're like, well, let's bring something and see what we have. And so I had already had some of these spiky balls, and Judy had already had this other spiky ball. And we're like, okay, so spiky balls are a thing for sure.
Little did we know.
I think part of our collaboration, what was a joy for us, was that we have known each other for such a long time and respect each other's work so much and really like each other's work so much. So some early sketches, we're gonna just kind of go through this quickly. This is where we started, right? So far away from where we ended up. Judy, this is your...
Yeah, so then after our get together, we retreated to our own studios and started making stuff based on the forms we'd talked about. And we talked about this sort of vesica sort of shape. And so I did a couple of 3D computer models. This is the modeling program that I work in. So I did this one, and you want to advance to the next slide. There's a collection of other sort of vesica sort of shapes. And I ended up adding in one that had a little ridge on it so that Bonnie could do cast paper following that form, and we could integrate those together with the 3D printed pieces. So I build the models, and then I put them on open them on the 3D printer and print them. I couldn't find a picture of one of the pieces printing, but this is the printer printing something. And you go
and then this is just a super quick, hey, I make paper. So I start with paper pulp. There it is in the Hollander beater getting processed. Then it goes into a vat, and I make sheets using a mold and decal. That's the picture on the top right. You can see what the pulp looks like on the left. And then after I make a sheet, I usually hand press. Sometimes I'll do a stack and press it under rocks. And then that bottom piece is just a picture of what the paper looks like before anything happens to it. So that's just the raw material for me, where I get started with all of my sculptural paper. And then, so I was working on molds that I would either use, in some cases, a balloon for the round spiky balls, I was able to find some round balloons rather than balloon-shaped balloons, so they don't look too, drop-shaped. And then I worked with oil clay to create these molds that I would then cover with the paper, allow the paper to dry, and then remove the clay. So I was able to not exactly reuse each mold because it would always get a little deformed when I pull it out, but at least in some cases reuse parts of them or just kind of touch them up a little bit and then go again. So the oil clay, I only started using this about 2 years ago, and it's become one of my best friends now. So then here's our next pile of stuff. At the next time we got together, we're like, well, what do we have now? Let's see. We've been working independently, and how does everything play? And you can see some of Judy's Vesica forms on the right down there. I started responding to some of her forms to create these. It's funny, I was thinking they're like the vaginas. They're just vaginas when I was making them. That's how they felt. And I was, kind of giving a nod to Judy Chicago, and figuring that by the time they got in the installation, they probably wouldn't quite feel quite so obviously that form, but they definitely are. That's all right. I'm good with it. It fits the show. This is the first time we got together to actually put our work together, Judy's pieces and my pieces, to create some forms that were, sort of complete. And so we started working in the way that Judy works, which is to have her forms and she uses a heat gun to soften the PLA so that it can get less computer feeling, less like it was produced by machine, and have a more natural flow. So we put together these forms, and we got really excited. So we made a few.
Then we got even more excited, and we made lots and lots of them.
We made a bunch. We were like, yeah, this is good. A lot of it was just responding to what was happening, and like, oh my God, I'm so excited. It was really, like you said, Judy, a lifeline of something to be excited about and something to look forward to. And that is where those forms ended up. And that's a couple of them in the installation. There's actually 7 different clusters of these that are part of the installation. Do you want to talk anything else about these guys, Judy?
Yeah, I think that pretty well covers it. I mean, it was just really fun because I had to learn how to work with paper, and Bonnie had to learn how to work with the 3D printed pieces in order to get these to respond to each other. And we basically would just like turn a pile of stuff over to each other and say, okay, I trust you with this, have fun. And we'd be like tearing each other's stuff up and putting it back together. And it was just a really joyous process.
So we knew that we were going to do an installation and that it wanted to have some fullness to it. So we started playing with this netting material that I had, and Judy got some too. So this is actually the netting dipped in the paper to help it sort of blend a little better, because there's a gray tone to it that we wanted it to be kind of softened a little bit.
And then I actually 3D printed on some netting so that it would have the 3D print incorporated in with it as well. And then we ended up, that just looked a little too clean. So we got it all over to Bonnie's studio, and we wadded it up and threw it in the vats of paper and got it all nice and caked with paper. And that really got it interesting, because then it really integrated with the netting that she'd been doing.
One of our challenges, I think, was finding ways to get the clean look of Judy's work and the really gritty, soft look of mine to play together well. This was about halfway through. We're like, let's do some more stuff. There'd been this one sort of tube shape in our original pile of stuff, and we thought, maybe let's do some more. So that was a sketch of what else we wanted to do. And then I started trying to build these things, and it was really tricky with the clay. I had to suspend it, and yet at the same time be able to get it out, because the paper tightens down on the mold when it dries. So there's a tube of sand inside, and then the clay, and then the paper around the top. And here's a bigger one that was about as much as I was able to manage, because without the string on top, the whole thing would just collapse, because there's nothing really rigid inside it. And then I would put plastic wrap around it so that the paper would release from the clay, and then the clay would release from the sandbag, and it was
Yeah, so there was this sort of obsessive thing that was happening. It's like, we want tubes. Oh, we want more tubes. Oh, we want bigger tubes. And then we want bigger tubes.
We needed a big tube.
Yeah, so then so then, like 4 feet tall wasn't enough. We needed 8 feet tall. And then how do you support that? And so I 3D printed a whole bunch of basically spirals and melted them and created this whole a 3D printed armature that we held together. And then we took that to Bonnie's studio and covered it with paper.
And we did first a thin layer on the inside, and then another textured layer on the outside. And then after that all dried, we decided it needed a bottom. So we had to go back in and put a bottom on it. And at one point it fell, and the armature on the inside decided that it didn't want to hold the wet paper because that got very heavy. And so then we had to repair it. But then that turned out better because it actually gave it a bit more of a softer movement to it.
Yeah, it was feeling a little rigid, and then it got kind of woogly after that, which was what we really wanted anyway.
And then
it needed stuff on it.
It was too plain, so it needed to have stuff like the wall things. So then we made a whole bunch of stuff. These are some more molds. We made a whole bunch of stuff. This is maybe a half of it, maybe not even. And then we stuck it all on. There's Taylor helping us hold things in place. So it's just glued on different parts to get the surfaces to be reacting to and responding and looking like the wall pieces. And there are lights inside this, which it was sort of hard to tell in the installation to light the outside and have the inside light coming through together. But
yes, truly, the longer that the opening got put off, the more stuff we had to have. And we just kept making more stuff and more stuff.
It worked out really well. This would have been a very different piece had it happened in May instead of June, because I was still teaching.
There was a lot that happened between May and June.
A lot. So this is the installation, building out the ceiling, and lots of ladder time, always. And there's Judy working on melting and shaping that PLA right up till the end with her heat gun. And that is the final installation.
You put so much energy and time into your installation that all of these collaborations you can spend hours talking about because they're all so fascinating. And pathogenic logic is fascinating in the old and the new, with the paper making and the 3D put together, 3D printing put together. And it's luminous and intriguing and really fascinating the way in which you explored these ancient but contemporary viral forms and patterns. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Sammy Lee is an interdisciplinary artist known for her paper sculptures, and owner of Collective SML, a contemporary art project and residency space. Megan Gafford is an artist who often uses unsettling materials like radiation, cybernetics, and more to explore the tension between pursuing knowledge and curiosity.
So Sammy and I have a connection with a city in South Korea called Daegu. And I lived there for 2 years as a kid, between 10 and 12 years old. And of course, I'm an American, I was a foreigner. And Sammy is Korean, her mom is from Daegu, but she's never actually visited the city herself. So it was a home for both of us, but also a kind of unfamiliar home, where for me, it's remembered through these kind of faded memories of childhood and being a foreigner with the language barrier and everything else that makes it harder to fully understand the culture. And then for Sammy, she understands the culture just fine because it's her culture, but she's never actually been there. So we started sharing memories, largely about our families and specifically our mothers, because my mom brought me there as a single mom right after my parents got divorced. So a lot of my memories are tied to that period. And I recently became a mother myself. I have a 6-month-old baby. And so we're both mothers and thinking about what it would mean to bring our kids there someday. And we're hoping to make the trip together. So I started making drawings, which you can see on the right-hand side in this image that Anna's sharing, of these memories that I have, trying to take something that was kind of ephemeral and turning it into something solid. When you're doing realistic observational drawings, you have to study something very carefully. So I was trying to take my memories of Korea and reinvigorate them, make them feel more recent for myself. And now I'll turn the mic over to Sammy, and she can describe what she did with that.
Sure. So Megan and I, we were at the Red Line together, spending 2 years of residency. That's how we met. And when I found out that she spent her 2 years in Daegu, it was like, whoa, that's where my mom is from. And that connection was very strong because, that's my mom's home. But because I myself immigrated into the US at age of 16, and I actually went to architecture school for graduate program, and we actually had kind of evaluation of sense of home, what that means for us. And we had to do in-depth study on that and report because we were working on an Alzheimer's center, designing Alzheimer's center. And, there was this kind of research finding that the sense of home is very important for Alzheimer patients. To kind of recreate that sense of home will really better their memory loss and their stableness. So at that time, I was like 30, early 30, and I counted how many times that I had moved until then. I was like surprised because it was 27 times already. I wasn't part of the military family, but I just moved so many times. And while other architecture students brought like maybe images from their childhood home, or like a place as a sense of home, I had none of that. It was just all fragmented. But as I researched more, I realized one thing, that Daegu really felt like home, although I'd never been there, just because that's where my mom, she'll always call Daegu, home. So I felt that instant kind of like it was a surprise that Megan spent that, and we're both. She was pregnant when we started talking about the collaboration in November, and I just thought that it would be really amazing to kind of tie that through motherhood and sense of home, and to revisit that the home. Immigration or motherhood often become part of my theme in my art making. So, and also because I know Megan from the residency, she has amazing kind of way of distilling idea into very simple, beautiful concept. So at that time, I think I really wanted, like, everything for me about this home is fragmented. It's sometimes it's like a home, it was a smell, it is certain lighting condition or certain view. It's everything about home is so fragmented that I almost wanted Megan, who's actually stayed in Daegu, to kind of guide me to through that idea of home.
I hope that I fulfilled all of your expectations. I do like to think of myself as a ruthless editor on my own work, whether I'm writing or making visual art, that I'll try to do my best to parse something down to only what's necessary. So the drawings are pretty minimalistic in that sense. They're single objects. The piece of barbed wire that was just on the screen is a piece of the demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea, where my mom visited. I was too young. They wouldn't let children go. But this is maybe the simplest drawing, but maybe also my favorite, because like Anna mentioned, I work with radiation in my art practice, and I moved to Korea around the time that North Korea probably got the nuclear bomb from Pakistan. So I feel like my life has really come full circle. But rather than give you that whole backstory, I try to simplify it and just give you this discrete image and leave a bit more room for wondering.
So in my practice, one of it is actually making what's called, I call it paper skin. It is by actually starting with a piece of paper, and I soak soak that into water, and I layer them and squeeze and knead and pound all those layer, and eventually it gets felted. The fibers of the paper get felted into one single substrate. And so it is like a laundry, domestic labor that I go through with this material. But after my time and labor, it transformed into something I consider very beautiful and thicker and very strong and resilient. So I basically enveloped 18 photo frames, picture frames, and just Megan's drawings are incorporated in there, and also like what you saw, like a small, just photos of those fragments of, you know, what makes me feel like home. You know, just the balcony view from this high-rise apartment in Seoul. And that's my first actually birthday table that I received. It's a Korean tradition. So, but what makes is a screen that kind of delineates certain space for this, you know, birthday girl. So all this kind of so I went through just different photos of my past and picking out certain photos and put it each are all in the frame. And just the process of revealing that images is actually like poking and with fingers and just kind of tearing apart to see what's under. So that was kind of the process. While paper is still wet, you're just kind of tearing, pulling to see what's underneath. So that's how it was made. And just because of the water, you know, because when I'm covering the photo frame, it's wet. And as I'm also kind of revisiting different area to tear, I have to wet that. So those kind of water marks are actually kind of nice, because on skin, it looks like almost like sometimes emotional, like, but kind of tears has dried up, but it really gives a sense of water that was present in the paper, which is very important for me, because water is very important process of making that paper skin. And also, it express different emotions. I titled this piece, Mama Bought Miss Daegu. So when I was actually interviewing my mom, I realized that she was actually just born in Daegu, but she never lived there either. So that was something that I would never known. But I found it interesting because she was always kind of proud to say that she was from Daegu. And as it turns out, I mean, that was kind of privileged area because of the dictator who served almost 4 terms until assassination. He was from Daegu, so there, you know, that was an area that got really developed when Korea was like post-war modernizing under the dictatorship. And also that area is known for a beautiful maiden. So Miss Daegu used to, you know, be like Miss Korea, like their kind of known reputation is, you know, with the town of beautiful, you know, ladies. So I think she just kind of enjoyed those kind of association. So when I kind of traced this back about sense of home, it was kind of not on that quite the truth of, you know, Daegu wasn't really home after all for anyone. But that was kind of the one interesting finding through this kind of investigation. We want to take this project, first of all, in a book format, and we have a mutual friend who has actually connections in Daegu. So we're hoping that it can go to Daegu for exhibition in near future when things become normal again.
Yeah, we can make memories together to incorporate into the projects.
That would be kind of truly rebuilding the connection with the place Daegu.
Make it an honest home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the collaboration evolve through time and through your experiences. And I love how you both approach the concept using your unique methods and memories. And your individual approaches also reflect the diverging experiences that you had in Daegu. And while the connections between the works emphasize the experience that you had in the same city. And it also reminds me of this quote from Maya Angelou that I love that has to do with home. The ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
I don't know about you, Sammy, but we both moved around so much. I almost feel like I can never fully understand that quote.
You know, I have a similar feeling to it. Home is a complicated concept. And sometimes instead of it being an actual place, it's in the people you love most.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Our next collaborative group is Deborah Howard and Laurel McMechan. So Deborah Howard is an artist known for her works, such as portraits of child Holocaust survivors, and her incredible installations of sculpted shoes and more. She has been teaching as a professor at University of Denver for many years. Laurel McMechan is an artist who explores interior and exterior worlds through collage and cubist strategies. She also teaches at DU. Welcome to the Artist Talk. I'll let you take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Like Anna said, I'm Laurel McMechan. I live here in Denver. I make paintings. My collaborator is Deborah Howard. And before I toss to her, I just want to tell you we made a video that shows some of our installation and merges it with our statement. So I'm going to play it for you.
Well, and I work together, and I think it'll get included, but we've known each other for about 17 years, and we've just reconnected around this project. It's kind of what happened. And it was a great experience. Yeah.
Kind of
very different. Very different.
Continuation of a mentorship moving forward. So
yeah, Laurel was my student many, many years ago, and we stayed in contact, but now it's kind of leveled off and we're kind of learning from each other. It's just kind of back and forth, just back and forth. Yeah. It's mutual.
Yeah.
Our piece is called Ida B. Wells. And this is printed fabric, and there's plexiglass hanging in front of them. And those are cut in gerrymandered shapes. So some of it's mirrored and some of it, and then there's different shapes around Ida. So our installation brings together the past and the present, the racism that existed during the women's suffrage movement and that continues today by preventing minorities from voting. Our installation specifically honors Ida B. Wells and her legacy. Ida was born in slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1862 and died in Chicago, Illinois in 1931. Ida was an African-American suffragist and civil rights activist who challenged white men in power to put an end to the lynching of Black men, women, and children. There were multiple reasons why white women in the suffrage movement marginalized Ida. Our piece addresses today's persistent racism through the use of partisan gerrymandering that blocks Black and brown citizens the right to vote. The shapes of gerrymandered districts represent where predominantly white citizens live, while the negative shapes that surround Ida's portrait represent the districts where minorities live. We see today's gerrymandering as a form of racism that blocks both minority women and men's access and participation in representative government that mirrors the racism and the political struggles Ida B. Wells experienced. We began work together in the studio, making drawings and paintings, projecting photos and layering, which was so much fun. When the pandemic struck, we were forced to continue designing remotely and were able to integrate our different ideas and imagery. The right fabric panel integrates a section of Deborah's painting It's in the top hand. The hand of it. It's a shape. Laurel's painting is on the bottom. It's another hand. So we managed to get our paintings in. The original design of the installation included many smaller hanging plexiglass pieces cut into gerrymandered shapes, making the finished piece during the pandemic transformed our context as artists. With the pandemic, we felt the material of plexiglass took on a new layer of meaning. It came to symbolize the restrictions to our physical interactions. The risks of gathering physically to vote during the pandemic has amplified how our access to voting remains in peril because not all states allow mail-in ballots. We are grateful in Colorado that congressional districts are decided in the courts, are nonpartisan, and we have mail-in ballots. We must continue Ida B. Wells' legacy and protect equal access to the ballot box for all citizens, regardless of gender and skin color.
I also love this, that we can see right here in this video, the reflections. That's one of the amazing things that happens when you see the piece in person, which I definitely recommend going to see, because yeah, it reflects not only Ida B. Wells' portraits, but also the surrounding artwork. And in that way it carries, you know, in the whole space, in that gallery space, and in that way it carries overlapping themes into the artwork, which is really fascinating.
Well, a lot of it we did not know was going to happen. We didn't know, everything got printed at the very last minute. I think we were the last people to install it. What was really great was there was a wind in the room, some kind of breeze, and it made the plexiglass turn. And it really activated the piece. The piece came to life once it was in there. And it caused also reflections, the mirrored ones that spread around across the floor. Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, the movement, it was totally unexpected. I mean, we knew the fabric was lightweight. We thought it might ripple a little more, but it was the plexiglass that really made it happen. And what we want to continue doing. Laurel, do you want to talk about what we're going to continue doing with the plexiglass?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say huge thanks and big ups to Emily and Connor.
Yes.
Colin. Who's Connor? Colin, who installed this for us because I was too freaked out to leave the house. And so it was such a strange experience to have someone else sort of finish your work for you.
Emily was great because the middle panel did not get done till the night before the show opened. So I drove down, we had it printed in California. I drove down that morning, I think that's what happened. And Emily, I gave it to Emily before the gallery was open, and she managed to get it up. They got it up before it opened. Yeah. But what Laurel and I have the pieces that are left. So you see these. The other thing I want to say about the plexiglass gerrymandered shapes, one of the things we liked about them is that they're beautiful. So the irony of something being so beautiful but ominous and nefarious, I mean, that's what I call them. They're the most dangerous shapes that you could have, but they're beautiful. So that whole concept, the tension between that, but the negative shapes, we still have the shapes that were cut, that are left from cutting these plexiglass shapes. So we're going to print them. We're going to work on using them to roll up ink on them and paint on them and do monoprints with them. And we have no idea what that's going to look like, but we still have these scraps of plexiglass that are left over. And in many ways, they represent, they represent different parts of a district, but they're leftover shapes, and we're going to work with them.
Yeah, I love that. Again, just like Sammy and Megan, the collaboration continues in different new ways. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for sharing these powerful images and videos with us.
Yeah, I'm
And
glad it worked. Thanks for bearing with everybody.
Thanks,
yeah,
Laurel.
I want to
Laurel.
I want to share with you a quote from Ida B. Wells as we transition to our next group. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And here's another one. Having lost my paper, had a price put on my life, and been made an exile from home for hinting at the truth, I felt I owed it to myself and to my race to tell the whole truth.
Nice.
Oh,
Thanks, Anna.
she was amazing, and she was a journalist, and her newspaper was burnt down because she was reporting lynchings. This was in Mississippi.
Yeah.
So she was way ahead of her time. She hyphenated her name. She ended up in Chicago. So I grew up hearing about her because I was from the south side of Chicago. So my mom would tell me about her. And I can't remember our conversation. Laurel was moving back. I started talking about, somehow it got to the shapes and Ida B. Wells and talking about that the people are still being prevented from voting. We didn't really talk about Trump, but we were talking about voting rights.
Yeah.
For people today, that it's still an issue,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And she really represents that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was just amazing. And her children and great-grandchildren, they're still alive. There's a couple museums from where she lives in Chicago and Mississippi that her great-grandchildren run.
Yeah, and this piece, I think, yeah, this piece, I mean, it really resonated too with all that we've been going through this year, with the pandemic being such a hardship on our community, but even harder on minorities, and also with Black Lives Matter. So this is a very powerful piece. Okay, so thank you again for sharing it with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So the next artists are Renee Millard-Chacon and Micaela, who, and Renee is an Indigenous Chicana activist, artist, and educator at Spirit of the Sun in Denver. Micaela is an Indigenous Chicana artist and activist. She is the co-founder of Women from the Mountain and an IIYC youth mentor and board member. They created the installation Am I Next? Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for having us all, and thank you those that went and spoke about your awesome projects. Again, like I said, my name is Micaela Dominguez, and my sister here is Renee Millard-Chacon. And I'll go ahead and start, and then I'm going to pass it to my powerful sister. So I'll just start off by stating who I am, because it really conspires or goes with, the project that we made here. Project is a little different than, I'd say, some of the pieces that are part of Pink Progression, and that's just because what we did was my sister and I made a video. We figured that was the best way to get out the message about missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I just want to start off by stating that I'm a Chichango, Lakota, and Chicana woman, and I was born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. My people come from the Rosebud Oyate Nation, which is in Rosebud, South Dakota, and that translates into the Burnt Thigh Nation. And I want to also acknowledge the land that I'm on, and that is the people of the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne, along with 48 other recognized tribes. And so as a young girl growing up here in Denver, Colorado, I grew up partially in South Denver and the other half in North Denver. And my experience as a girl allowed me to become really the woman that I am today. As a human rights advocate, an IIYC youth, mentor and board member, and co-founder of Women from the Mountain, I work to bring women of all backgrounds together in a way that allows us to empower each other and create strong matriarchal bonds for future generations. My continued pursuit is to help spread awareness and stop the violence on our women and two-spirit people that have endured for centuries. Then maybe we can begin to feed our families and communities that love and communities for the love and sustenance that they require to thrive again. I'm a huge advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women. And those of you who aren't familiar with missing and murdered Indigenous women, I'll give you a little history about the movement. Our First Nation sisters started leading this movement decades ago. The term missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls started over in Canada with the First Nation sisters Highway of Tears. They're continuing to fight a systematic racism and speak for our loved ones today. And when I say ours, it's because we don't have borders. That's a colonized concept. So just want to state that. From the tip of Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, which is Argentina and Chile, our Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people are being murdered, kidnapped, and silently trafficked around the world at an alarming high rate. That's 3 times higher than any other marginalized and targeted communities. Indigenous women have been targeted in America since 1492, when Christopher Columbus and other colonizers kidnapped young women and girls and held them against their will throughout Europe. This was just the beginning of sex trafficking epidemic that we see in America today. The Department of Justice surveyed 2,000 of us Indigenous women. 84% of these women reported they experienced sexual violence at some point in their lives. 90% of these women's attackers were non-natives. 60% of these women reported they also experienced psychological violence after resulting in the return to their abuser. That means 1 in 3 Indigenous girls and women will experience some sort of violence, be that physical, psychological, or sexual in their lives. And unfortunately, right now, there is no infrastructure in place to gather crucial information needed to accurately quote numbers and statistics. And whilst missing and murdered Indigenous women have been the focal point of many studies and statistics, data is still incomplete, and research reflects that of missing and murdered Indigenous women, trans, and Two-Spirit youth. Something that recently just happened, which was actually a big victory for us, and soon that will change, and that was the Savannah Bill was passed last Monday. And while my sister Renee, as I pass it on to her, I will try to find that article and pass it on to you, because that is actually really huge for us and huge for this movement. And I will let my sister Renee go ahead and speak a little bit, I know more on that and her powerful words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mika. Thank you for being here. My name is Renee Millard-Chacon. I am co-founder of Women from the Mountain. I am a cultural educator at Spirit of the Sun, youth program coordinator, Vista at AmeriCorps Vista, and I'm a mom of 2 children. I'm also a climate activist and Chicana activist for Indigenous rights locally, including a fight against Suncor. So I fight on a lot of fronts, and this is the one that's most personal. This is the one that is most transformative. This is the one that every piece in it has meaning and prayer. I'm also a samadora as a danzante and danzante azteca. I am native to these lands. And I want anyone with an earshot to keep in mind that we all are both predator and prey in the predatory capitalism and extractive industries that is harming missing and murdered Indigenous women. We are the first victims of colonization. And it's really frustrating that it's taken this long to be able to have these conversations in these spaces, and that it's taken social justice and social injustice movements and climate injustice movements to even come to these tables. So though I'm grateful to be here, I find it very concerning that we're the only ones right here being able to talk or being able to infiltrate these spaces and being able to talk about our own platforms without them being hijacked in a way in their own narratives. So I ask you to keep that in mind, and that's what transformative art and education is supposed to do. And that's why we do what we do, why we started Women from the Mountain. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for a number of years. I started as a special needs teacher. My background's actually in news editorial. I used to write even for the Daily Camera. I'm here to Colorado, and I love Colorado. My husband also served for 10 years in the US Navy as a nuclear engineer, and I went with him to every port, every single port from South Carolina up to Maine, from Oregon down to San Diego. And I also learned my traditional ways as a danzante, as a samadora, which is a woman that holds the smoke, the poposhkome, so that I can teach my children and my family first the importance of our cultural resiliency. And now I teach cultural resiliency at Spirit of the Sun. So I've been privileged and blessed to be able to bring back education. So education is transformative. Our people hold knowledge sacred, and knowledge and art go hand in hand. And that's what we want to bring in the spaces that we come to, is to understand that everything that we touch has to always be transformative. You have to be learning and constantly learning, creating and constantly creating, dismantling and constantly creating. And that's the type of spaces that I would like to transform and speak about and create discomfort, because this is now the time to actually strike that, because of the political climate, because of literally the environmental climate, and because I'm seeing a moral panic as an educator in the communities that I work in during COVID right now. This is no joke. People are dying. People are being harmed. Socioeconomic turns are turning, and we're all feeling it. So now is the time to create. Now is the time to take that filth and throw it back into society and really show that as a reflection. And this is ours. Missing and murdered Indigenous women strikes me to my sister, literally. She is not here anymore. Right now, I'm holding Palo Santo, which is one of our medicines, just to be able to speak to you in a clear way, because this is so personal. And I ask you to hold that, because there are so many people that have mourned for generations these things and have created so many beautiful things that are not even penetrated in the American identity still. We're called folklore art, but not fine art. Where there's so many different things that we need to bring to attention now, that I ask you to dismantle about yourselves when you look at pieces like ours. When you see that, yeah, the Savannah Act has passed, thank you, Creator. Yeah, that just happened recently. But how many women have died along our roadways for that to have happened? And I mean from here to Canada, down to Mexico and maquiladoras on the frontera and in detention centers now. How many women have also been sterilized and harmed and silenced in the American identity? How many pieces of creation of art can you imagine that amount of suffering and love and cultural resiliency creates? I'm just asking to inspire that as a teacher, bringing this sort of narrative here. So I ask anyone listening to become active, to realize that you can both create in your space, whether it be in art or social justice or social balance again, and bring that where you come from. I do that as a mother. I do that as a Samadora. I do that as a sister. I love my Mica and all of her familia and all those women that have come before me and that will come after me. So I ask those that look at our space, look at every name that we put on there. We put every one of those names we blessed, literally time and time again, because they range from 6 months within our data to 60 years old. They range from deceased to missing. And we've put our, even though it goes in the form of a red dress, though that started in Canada, it's supposed to be that symbol of that emptiness and loss and that calling of spirit back with red, because red is sacred. So we honor that in a physical form, and we simply have adopted the narrative from Canada. We did not create this narrative. This comes from an 11-year-old Métis girl in Canada from losing her family and her relatives. So the information that we provide on the video is locally of information of how you can support policies within your area. And I mean victim advocacy, women's self-defense courses, things that are going to be realistic, and data collaboration within agencies. We need search and rescue. We need to make art into reality too. And I really would like to see art and artists start getting uncomfortable in your spaces and asking where you can share your platforms with BIPOC instead of speaking for BIPOC. I know that's going to be a discomfort, and if you would like to talk about it, I would love to. I literally also do policy and task for an ally and accomplice workshops too. And I do that because I care about education and the way of transferring and transforming. So please keep that in mind. I thank you for hosting this, and any kind of questions or anything about our exhibit, I would love to answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
You both and the installation has so much strength, power, and importance, and it really resonates in the exhibition and in this artist talk. Systemic racism and sexism have been pervasive in our country, and it really does need to stop.
We also have our list of demands off of Santa Fe, 9th and Santa Fe, where we have our art there. And in Boulder, you'll see our exhibits all over and pasted around town. So if you want to look around, I think that one's on Folsom and Pearl.
Thank you again so much. Yeah. Very important words and powerful and needed. Our next collaborative group is Julie Puma and Patricia McInroy. Julie Puma is an artist known for her figurative paintings. She has a solo exhibit at Emmanuel Gallery right now. She's also professor at Rocky Mountain Art and Design. Patricia McInroy is a former photojournalist who works primarily in photography and video. She also teaches at the Rocky Mountain Art and Design, and they created Mixed Bag, Women's Thoughts on Current Affairs for the exhibition.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Anna especially, but Emily too, for all your hard work. And Colin, I feel completely honored to be a part of this exhibition. We have some slides and a very short teaser of our video that's hanging in the gallery. And I'm just going to share my screen right now. So to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote in the United States, Mixed Bag Women's Thoughts on Current Affairs is a body of work intended to extrapolate from contemporary American women, current political and social topics. Approaching women on the street, we asked what their major concerns are on current affairs. These topics included, but were not limited to, healthcare, abortion, gun control, immigration, and climate change. We made every effort to get a diverse sampling of women and allowed the interview to veer off topic organically. We filmed the interview and took photographic portraits as part of the interaction. We hope their images and words operate as a small snapshot of what women in our country today think is relevant. We began collaborating in the spring of 2019, and we were very comfortable right away. But none of us could have predicted of how drastically our world would change in a matter of days. We are immensely grateful and relieved that we began our project a year ago and therefore had a decent body of work. We discussed including some more polarized voices so that our statement of work would be well-rounded. However, due to the pandemic, that was not possible. It is arguable that we could have continued working and included content that would have morphed and changed due to the current world crisis, but we both discussed a feeling of apathy towards conducting Zoom interviews as opposed to being out in the community. It is our belief that the body of work you are viewing represents the passion and intellect of both the artists and subjects, and feel proud of the work we accomplished. Patricia did all the editing for the video. Credit due. Can you guys hear it?
Pink Progression 220. The next presidential election is coming up really soon. I'm ready for it. I'm trying to tell you. 2020. I just turned 18 and I'm November? Yes. I don't know. Yeah, November, right? 2020. Okay, Gardner. November 28th. Okay. 2020.
I can't believe that this is the 100th anniversary. I feel like it should be longer.
I feel it's a civic duty. We live in a democracy. The whole point is to give the citizens a say. You know, I don't always feel great about the process.
To like make your voice heard and to have an opinion and be educated?
Okay, so the actual video is a lot longer, but that was something that we put out as sort of like a trailer. And so the rest of the slide presentation are portraits. And so Patricia, if you want to just jump in, some of these we did together and some of them we did separately.
So I'm just going to say a few words too. I really, I feel so like proud to be part of this exhibition, and I feel really fortunate to be included. And it's been really cool to hear the background story on all this work. I've gotten to see the exhibit twice, and I'm hoping to go one more time. There's just a lot to take in at the exhibit. So thanks especially to Anna and Emily for doing this, and I feel great about being included. Julie and I did some of our work separately and some of it together, but we tried to make it look like, you know, had a unified look to it, basically. So these, this right here was one that Julie took, and this was when we were together. So we went downtown.
No, I was just going to say that we just switched off. Like, yeah. I think one point that I wanted to say about our process is I'm a painter, so I like hole up in my studio, and I'm kind of introverted in nature, even though I can interact just fine. And so it was, I think we were both really like nervous to approach people on the street, and we got rejected a lot. And it was really good to kind of push out of my comfort zone anyway and interview people, because this one was the first one that we did, and it felt like she really just didn't have a whole lot to say. So, and then this couple, I think what turned out to be just so delightful was just how wonderful these people that we interviewed were, and how they really just, after that first one, really gave a lot of information and felt very passionate.
And these two are sisters, and they're not from Denver, but they were visiting Denver. One thing I love about interviewing people is that they'll just say stuff they wouldn't say in normal conversation, and people want to be heard. It's like really a gift to listen to people. So it felt really special to be able to do that with complete strangers.
So after we had our turn doing the interview, then the person who was asking the questions, then I would take the photograph. And so this was one that I took as well. And then go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, and then I took this one. This is Rain. I actually sent her the picture, and she loved it and wrote me back a thank you. I tried to send some other people pictures, but they literally just had forgotten who I was. Probably, like just probably thought it was spam or something, but she was really sweet about it.
That's so nice. I never sent any pictures. Thanks for telling me you did that. And then, so this next couple of, oh no, I spread them out, but I actually went to Chicago because I felt like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like, well, I'm from Chicago. I lived there for 10 years in the city and then in the suburbs, but I also feel like sometimes I just live in my bubble here, and I really wanted to get a diverse culture, not just diverse in terms of ethnicity, but diverse in terms of neighborhood and economic and social, and just really have a well-rounded body of work. And so I went on the south side of Chicago with a friend of mine, and we went into this laundromat, and I had the most beautiful conversations with these people that were in the laundromat. And if you do go to the gallery and see their interviews, they were wonderful. And so I'll actually just skip ahead. This was her mother, and boy, she had a lot to say. And it's so interesting to hear how, when we presented them with the questions, what is important for you in voting, it was so much about gun control and violence in these neighborhoods. I was really affected by that. Okay, go Patricia.
Okay, this was one that I did. And of course, with a sweatshirt like that, it was like, I gotta talk to her. Like, let's see if she'll talk to us. And she was really great. And she's somebody that has had tons of healthcare issues. And she said they've nearly gone bankrupt. So she just had a really interesting story. And you could just almost see on her face, like her life experience on her face. So.
And so also on the south side of Chicago, this was a different day. This is what I find so interesting. Like, speaking of what's happening in our current climate, like, I love going into these neighborhoods. I know I'm the only white person there, but I'm not afraid. I mean, these are some rough neighborhoods a little bit. This was a church group. They were handing out supplies, and she's just amazing. If you go to the gallery and see the interviews, she had a lot to say about gun violence. So let's see. Go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, and then this young lady is in Kansas. So I was at a film festival in Kansas, and part of my approach was just like, wherever I go, I'm going to try to take a few portraits so that we could get a little bit more variety geographically. And I wanted to talk to some people that were a little more rural. She's actually organizing events for women in her area, and her dad was really supportive of her. So I had to ask her dad's permission to talk to her since she was so young. But anyway, she was also quite inspiring as someone who was young and open-minded and excited.
And then back on the south side of Chicago, I was just really, I mean, I did get a lot of looks, that's for sure. Like, what are you doing here? And no way am I talking to you. But this woman was just lovely and was so excited to talk to me. And then her friend, he just jumped in, and they were fun and playful, but they answered the questions seriously. So,
but anyway, if you drop in at any time, it's on a loop, so you can kind of see how it goes across. And this is another person from Kansas, and we really didn't get to talk to a lot of people that were more conservative. We kind of realized, like, oh, we should probably talk to people that are a little more like that. She's actually a little more middle of the road, but she did talk about gun rights in a different way than people were talking about that were in more urban environments. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, and then I had a couple that I took up in Wisconsin at a farmer's market. And that was a great place to find people too. It's really helpful if you can go to a public place where everyone's already interacting. It's really awkward if you're not in a place like that sometimes. So that turned out to be a great place, but it was also a little tricky because it was raining that day. So yeah, you have to go back to the gallery to see the interviews. And that's my friend Dee. So she's in Wyoming, and I was visiting her, and she is a Cheyenne River Sioux. We've been friends for about 30 years. And she also helps me out with my mom a lot. So I also interviewed Dee, and she's an awesome person, one of my best friends. And so is that one. So is that about it? Yep, her too. And she spoke too about ICE, and just that some of her family members lived in fear. And I thought that was also really important to get that perspective. So.
Yeah, thank you, Julie and Patricia. You really do have to experience this piece at the Arvada Center. I love how their voices resonate through the galleries. When you go, you'll hear them, and the piece will draw you in. And the work is so relevant to 2020 as we approach the election. And again, the photographs and video document in real time the real voices of American women. So
and I do just want to say one last thing, which is, I think our piece can get overlooked because it's kind of like small and it's a video piece. And I have to admit, like, it felt small in the big gallery, but it felt like such a big project. But so being able to talk about it, I really encourage you to go back and actually, because there's something about the way that these people are saying what's important to them that you can't get just from looking at the subtitles. So just.
Yeah, and we had hoped originally to have headphones so that you could put them on and hear it at full volume. But of course, with the pandemic, it just didn't seem like the thing to do. So yeah. So thanks for your interest. It's really, really cool to get to share this on a different way. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your installation with us. And definitely go check it out at the Arvada Center up through November 8th. Rian is an artist known for her cast iron and fabricated sculptures and installations. She's taught for many years as a professor at University of Colorado, Denver. Melissa Furness is known for her intricate paintings and sculptures, and she has been teaching for many years at the University of Colorado, Denver, and she is also represented by K Contemporary. They created Port of Gilded Proclivities for the exhibition. I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Hey, thanks, Anna.
Hi.
We have a few images to share, and we are in the same room, even though there's a line between us around here. We could cross it, but it's unique, isn't it? Among 60-something people. We are teaching hybrid. We're on campus. We our worlds overlap a lot, not just with collaboration. But first off, can I just say thanks, Anna, and thanks, Emily and Colin, and all the artists, of course, but big, we love you. Great show, right?
We've been collaborating for, I'd say, over 6 years now, since about 2014. And, this is an overview of some of our collaborative work, so you can see.
Well, and this is the first one that we really worked on. No? Oh, dear, we're going to have a fight now. Sorry. This is why we write resumes.
I mean, I guess I suppose you could say this is the one that we sort of conceived together. They weren't ever separate pieces, right?
Oh,
you might say.
Okay.
Right. The first one was the spiked mine one. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So I think what we talk about a lot with these images as we peruse through them is the range of media that we're incorporating together. And Melissa is often working with oil paint, other ingredients on this one, as in
that's oil painting and acrylic as well. Transfer of a fabric on a pattern on the back.
So it is on fabric and on stretchers, and then it's a steel sort of frame that I had fabricated prior but customized for this work, where it hinged together, and it's cast iron and steel on the top. It's cast iron and steel and wood in the railings and the sort of religious effigies of the Virgin Mary in the foreground. So so this goes back a while, and some of you might have seen it at K Contemporary at the December show.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as we go through, you can kind of see, we have certain parallels with our work, and it's different, but there's certain things that we kind of come together on, and I would say pattern, domesticity, and narrative, sort of epic versus private narrative in the work. So this was the painting itself is actually like a 10-foot long double-sided triptych. This is another piece that we did, oil painting flat on the ground with Rian's cast iron mops.
So I love this piece, and it's only been, it was pretty recent as a collaboration, and we do our own work independently, and then it's like an opportunity arises to maybe think about a collaboration again, or we just come up with an idea and say, what about doing that? And then we mess around and something happens. So we've been on and off collaborating for a while, and I have a history of collaborations before in my world, and I love that collaboration is always so very, very different for everybody that does it, right? And I suppose one thing to talk about is egos in a way with collaboration. I didn't tell Melissa I was going to talk about this, but just, when you have personalities together, and I've been through several versions of what collaboration can be like, and each one is different, and each sculpture we collaborate on is different, or I call them sculptures, but they're sort of diorama installations of sorts. So, but I think a third person or a third entity is created when there's a collaboration. That idea that it's no longer Melissa, it's no longer Rian, it's this other thing. It's like becoming a Mr. and Mrs., the married sort of component or something. So you're letting go of yourself to build something else, which is the poetry of it, sort of.
Well, I think for us, it's maybe it's different because I don't know. It seems to be easy. The collaboration seems easy to me. Like I don't know. I think the way that we talk, we're like, oh, hey, I have an idea. What do you think of this? And I'm like, okay, cool, let's try it. And then we both go and do it. But I think part of it is like, since we do kind of work together, we see each other's work and we're kind of familiar with it. And I think that there's sort of a comfort in sort of this knowing of what we already do, that it comes a little bit more naturally than maybe with other types of collaborations that I've done before anyway.
I think trust is a part of it. Like we trust each other. You brought that up one time, and I think it helps us talk about work. We talk about our own work, which is a nice aspect, a layer to making together, right? So it pushes our ideas. So the cast iron mops are replicas of cloth, sort of raggedy and mop heady thingies, bought new at a janitor supply, doing sand molds with iron. But all of the handles are either used or purchased janitor plastic ones and customized to fit around the iron. The oil painting was made on a stretcher and then cut out and trimmed, a little like the one in the show that is on right now.
Well, I think a lot of what we're playing with, a lot of what I like to play with is this idea of like, what do we discard and what do we uphold or hold high? Like an oil painting is sort of this thing that, it's sort of you step away from, and it's sort of this untouchable thing. And for me to like make it a beautiful painting, but then cut it apart and throw it on the ground and put iron on top, to me is, freaking heavy iron.
She patted under the painting so I wouldn't put a dent in it. So, and I like that you said that, because what I'm doing it with bringing a mop into the gallery is also bringing something mundane that's a recognizable object. I'm translating it into another medium and then raising its prestige by our respect for the gallery, right? And the pedestal.
So these are my sources for, as you may know, I do a lot of travel, and I use travel for inspiration, international travel. And, as we know, Rian is from Ireland and also travels as well. So it's this idea of like what we discard and how I could make the refuse of another culture beautiful in some way. That's kind of where that idea comes from.
Where is this taken?
In China, in Beijing.
Oh, it's our latest little baby. And we had great fun making this. I had I'm often cannibalizing previous works or works that really never got shown. I have a scrap pile of works, as it were, stuff. So the 6-foot circle had been fabricated prior, but not with legs, not with springs. And the legs are cast iron. The text on it was there. Some pieces were missing. I replicated them again, but it says north, south, east, west, and happily ever after, and once upon a time. And then smaller little cafeteria lettering. It's all cast bronze now. That references domestic narratives like kitchen sink, married, wooed, etc. Right? And you've got this video. The idea of bouncing on a trampoline, and a trampoline being disorientating, and so our relationships, and so is roles that we take on, and especially as, say, the housewife, so we were sort of influenced by Martha Rosler and all that generation of feminism in some regards.
And I see it like it's a trampoline, but it's also in some ways kind of like a compass, like this sort of direction, but also misdirection. Like for the painting, I was kind of playing off of Martha Rosler's, idea of like, the kitchen dishes, but then sort of taking it through that guise of like the sort of Western canon of art, which I've been trying to break down in some of my other recent work. and I do study abroad in Italy, and actually there was these forms I was particularly interested in, the Nautilus cup. And so underneath all of the Nautilus cups are gold leaf that I actually got from Italy recently, which is interesting at the time of coronavirus breaking out, and I didn't know it at the time in December and January when I was there. But this Nautilus cup is a kind of fascinating object to me because, Rian and I also deal with narratives, but this was an object that was kind of like, I don't know, a novelty at the time in 13th century. And it was an object of trade across kind of more of a global sense, and at that time, I suppose. And it just symbolized this exchange of networks at that time. And then also, it started to get embellished with these other kind of narratives of like mythological gods and monsters, which was kind of interesting to me. And then I like to play on, I suppose, puns in some ways with my work. So this idea of the shell, and it's the empty shell, obviously the animal is no longer in it. And I like this idea of like an empty shell of a person, someone without direction. So that's kind of how the whole piece interweaves together.
And because she's saying that now, I can think of something else that I think is a connection. That's what collaboration is sort of like, right? But, all the objects that are up and down bouncing in the video are from the domestic sphere. They're containers and vessels and cups. And, there's a lovely relationship back to the content of the painting being the clutter of our world in some regards, different configuration. Please don't bounce on it. You see it. So this actually is the first one, I think.
Yes,
I'm right?
Yes, this is the first one.
And these two spheres were elements that I had in previous works and as independent sculptures and in collaborations. And then we paired it with the painting on the right with painted lines on the gallery wall and extension cords sort of merging. So that it became an extension of the painting. And on the left is another work of Melissa's that you might recognize from Plus Gallery some time ago. Yeah, it showed
quite
there.
some time ago.
Yeah. But look, I that's me in grad school in New Orleans at the University of New Orleans. So that's where I actually started fabricating what was these hemispheres were from kids' playground stuff. The blue and the white went together. They weren't built to be together. So I customized them and then added all these spikes and ended up on the right is the image that shows it in a much larger installation that might have been a room that was 70 by 40 or something with a lot of other stuff happening. So it was a detail. It used to also rotate and spin on a motor. And so just to show where some of our work comes from too, I thought it might be interesting. I'm sort of have a long lineage of relationship to the Arvada Art Center pre-Emily, who we now all love greatly. But this goes back a while ago, I think 2014 as well. It was one of 5 installations in there, and that's all audio tape and knitted audio tape and kinetic elements like there was sound in there too of knitting, the steel needle sound, and cake mixers turning on and off, etc. So it was like a big environment. But I also am interested in performance. This is in Ireland. I was on sabbatical recently, I think. Maybe that was when I did this. But it's called Greener, and this is the highest mountain in my home county of Donegal, which is now stage 3 for coronavirus, the only other county outside of Dublin, apparently. Its proximity to Northern Ireland is maybe one of those reasons, because they had less stringent controls, and there's a lot of travel from Northern Ireland into the Republic and Donegal, which is also in the north. But this highest mountain is also very close to where immigrants leave. And there's a bridge there called the Bridge of Tears. So you can say goodbye to somebody and then they go over that hill and you can't watch them go off into the distance sort of thing. But it's, this is the Devil's Snare, and it's 2 peaks on the same mountain. So I walked over and back a lot with a suitcase that belonged to my father in university, a sort of cardboard pinstripe, and made a video. I had to climb up with them, everything up there too. It was a pretty fierce little climb. They're hills by the Rocky standards, but it's an older landscape. But beautiful Ireland. I bring students to Ireland all the time, and I love returning. This is the Arvada Art Center. We did a big iron pour there, and I'm just interested, some of you might know me from Iron Pores in the community, and it is such a, it dominates my world a little bit, but it's a really wonderful community vehicle to exchange. Somebody mentioned earlier, knowledge and art go together, and I think I agree with that so much. Education and art go so much together, same sort of duality. Casting bronze, I learned how to make dung molds out of horse dung in Ireland when I was also up on that mountain. These are the leather school satchels from my brothers and sisters. I made a series of these cast in bronze, so they're life size.
Yeah, this I actually showed a version of at the Arvada Center as well. If you remember, like in the sort of atrium area of this kind of tapestry that was suspended and somewhat transparent, based off of imagery that I gathered actually from Ireland when I did a residency there. And then this work from Mexico City, the project that I did when I was in residence there, I painted 315 paintings and 100 drawings that all became part of this sort of epic pile that terrified everyone, which I loved, that was sort of suspended and almost falling apart and falling down, creating kind of a personal narrative of my experience of, I don't know, taking on temporary status of working in another culture, I suppose.
Can I just talk about the site specificity of installation? I love it. Using the Republic Plaza lobby area. If you haven't seen Scotty Burgess's show there right now, you should see it. And that's a sneaky version of my works in the background, because that's a wallpaper of mine that has cast iron and fake flora, fauna, and paint and just tape and stuff.
It's wonderful to see how you have collaborated in so many ways in addition to the Arvada Center, and to see that history. And I also love how with your installation at Arvada Center that each component is done so technically well, from the cast iron base to the painted objects and the projections that activate the trampoline. I love the multiple layers of dimension and interpretation. Ashley Frazier is a multidisciplinary artist exploring the relationship of people and their surroundings by painting the allure with the uncanny, as well as the natural and artificial. Becky Wareing Steele is an artist who holds a BA in art history and specializes in small scale sculpture. Welcome to the Artist Talk. We're excited to hear more about your installation in the show.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm here and I'm so sorry my camera's not working, but I'll go ahead and start things off by talking about our process, and then Becky will go over some of the symbolism within our work. When Becky and I first started working on our collaboration, we had a lot of conversations about the theme of the exhibition and the notion of coming together. So we used the theme of coming together as a jumping off point. And I remember seeing an image of one of Becky's works, and it was this small hippo on its back with a hollowed out belly, and had either, I think it was geodes or people swimming in it, maybe both. But I was really drawn to this bowl-like shape and how the people were kind of set in that space and interacting in there. So with this inspiration, we had more conversations and landed on using the egg or eggshells as an anchor material for developing our collaboration. And Becky was really great about time management and keeping us on a schedule, which gave us a lot of time for discussion and experimentation. And when COVID started, we were already in the creation stage. So we were able to make our own standalone works that came together during the installation. I myself am very material driven in my process, and working with Becky made our collaboration more human and relatable because she literally brought people into the equation And it was inspiring for me to work with narrative in such a new way. So I think with that said, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Becky to talk more on the symbolism.
Yeah, so this shows you our complete installation. So yeah, for Ashley and I, it was such an interesting time for us to finally be able to collaborate. Like Sammy Lee and Megan Gafford, we met during our residency at Redline. And there are some similarities in our work as far as our treatment of materials. So it was, you know, something that we've been looking forward to for a while, to be able to collaborate with one another. And when this exhibition came up, it was, you know, the perfect opportunity, and Ashley invited me to come on board with her. And yeah, I mean, it really started with the material, and I think it was Ashley who had brought up using the eggshell, and I think as artists too, utilizing things that are, you know, naturally already within our homes feels really good in the creative process. But also the, you know, the imagery and the symbolism that comes with the eggshell. And I'm going to kind of just move through some of these images as well as we talk. And for Ashley and I, you know, talking about the eggshell and the symbology behind it. And I think that, you know, oftentimes, you know, women's bodies are treated like objects, especially when it comes to legislation surrounding our bodies, and especially with, you know, this notion that Roe versus Wade could possibly be overturned in the future. But, you know, really thinking about this idea of, you know, women often being removed from the conversations around their own bodies. So I think for Ashley and I, these objects really have women at the center. And especially, you know, including the figures within the works too is really meant to, you know, kind of place the viewer within the work as well. So they're very, you know, small works, but I think they have a large presence in the fact that, you know, kind of shrinking yourself down to the scale of what, you know, you're seeing yourself represented as that small figure. And I think we were both really careful too, not to say necessarily the exact meaning behind the works. We left the artist statement a little vague in that sense, so that, you know, hopefully people could kind of have these quiet meditative moments with each work, and really be able to, you know, see themselves within it, but, you know, also have that relate to their experiences and what comes up when they're seeing this imagery as well. Ashley, do you have anything else to add?
I think that summed it up pretty good. It was such a great experience being able to collaborate. I think I don't know that I would have necessarily pushed myself in that direction had I had an option, but because there wasn't an option, it was just this really great experience that actually has really influenced my own work moving forward and has brought all these new concepts and materials and ideas into my own practice. So in that way, I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, and it was interesting for us too. We had the opportunity to meet in person before, you know, all of the social distancing restrictions.
Right.
So, you know, we had that time to create together in person. I know we keep using the phrase that, you know, it came together like two halves of a whole, which it really felt that way, because, you know, we were still able to communicate via online communications, but it was really, I think, that install day that felt really, you know, amazing for both of us to be able to see the works that we were each creating.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna, for organizing this. This is, you know, a wonderful exhibition, and, you know, thank you to all of the artists who have spoken this evening. It's been really wonderful to hear more about your works, and thank you to Emily and Colin and the entire Arvada Center.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing again your process and your artwork with us. The sculptures are fragile yet bold, and the act, for example, of a tiny figure holding up a rope that is proportionally large emphasizes her strength and persistence. I wanted to also repeat what Ray Rinaldi wrote about the work. He said in a recent article that the sculptures are full of imagination and possibility, all generated from the symbol of female fertility that serves as their sole force. They are the smallest attractions in the show, but speak volumes. Kerrane is an artist who is known for using non-traditional media to construct installations. She is head of ceramics and sculpture at Arapahoe Community College. Lisa is a printmaker and educator also at Arapahoe Community College. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. All right, great. So Lisa is actually in Aspen right now, so she's on the phone, but I'm going to be doing, I think, most of the talking because she can't get on Zoom. She can't get Wi-Fi. So I'll be doing it. So hi, everybody. It's been really wonderful hearing all of your stories, getting a more intimate look at your work. Thanks to everyone at the Arvada Center. Anna, it's a tremendous show. So this is our piece at the Arvada Center. It's called Novel Landscape. It's on the second floor. And when Lisa and I first started making this work, the virus hadn't started yet, but it really pretty much started about 2 weeks into our process. So I'm going to scroll through some of the images. Lisa and I both teach together at Arapahoe Community College. I teach ceramics and sculpture, and she teaches printmaking. And for about 3 years, her and I have collaborated together in the classroom, teaching printmaking on ceramics called Form and Surface. So we really wanted to collaborate together on our own work besides in the classroom. So we met, I think probably we met in February maybe. So yeah, we're one of those groups that worked really at the last minute on this. No, we both teach full time, and we wanted to have our collaboration going while we started our class, which was in January. So the first thing that we did is we sat down together, and we both have an interest in landscape and the macro and the micro fractal patterns in the natural world. That's something that we always sort of appreciated in each other's work. And initially for this exhibition, we started off exploring ideas of climate change and global warming. My work has a tendency to be sort of political in sort of more environmental interests. And Lisa has always been really interested in landscape. So we went through this book of, 1,000 aerial landscapes, and we both agreed on these two images. The one on the left is ice sheets that are melting, and then on the right is evaporated pools of water, creating these sort of salt structures. And so both of these are sort of representative of both too much water and not enough water in climate change. And the images really struck us as sort of a starting point for our collaboration. So from the images, we vectorized the landscape and overlaid the images of the glacial melting with the salt pools in Illustrator, with the intention that these would then be laser cut and etched at the college. And right around the time that we were working on these files, COVID-19 hit. We were both teaching together in the same class. We had to go online. We lost access to the studio, to the laser cutter. So I was frantically, begging campus police to let me finish these laser prints. Otherwise, we would have nothing to work with. So we ended up, being sent in our separate studios at this point because of the virus. And we've all been through it, sort of the isolation, the concern, the worry. And my work has always been engaged with the micro. And so I obviously started researching what this virus looked like. And we all know what it looks like. But I was also looking at sort of how it was sort of affecting the country statistically, and just really obsessed with how it was spreading globally. And every week we would check in, the maps would just get more and more extreme to the point where you couldn't even see the landscape anymore. And we both were sort of struck by this, being that our work was about landscape and how we might sort of cope and communicate what we were going through, through the work. So I got everything laser etched that I could. We wanted to laser etch about 12 plates, and I think we only ended up getting 6. So we didn't have as many shapes as we were hoping to work with, but we were able to be sort of sneaky, and ingenuity set in, and we figured out how to work with that. But Lisa is a printmaker, and so she was really excited to ink up these laser etched plates with the salt texture, and run them through her printing press to create collagraphs. So you can see the picture on the left is one of the plates before it's been inked up, and then the one on the right, it's inked up and then run through the press. And so one of the reasons why we wanted to collaborate, well, at least for me, is I really wanted to get better at printmaking because I know ceramics really well, but printmaking is something that's sort of, it's always in the background for me, but I don't know the technique as well as Lisa. But unfortunately, because of the virus, we ended up having to do a lot of shipping and passing around work. So I would give her all the plates, she would print them, then she would bring them to my studio, and then I would cut them up into the shapes that they were. But then I actually started cutting them up into other shapes to give ourselves some more landscape forms to work with. And the color pink started emerging from this, because pink is something that obviously is a part of the show, but pink and red to represent sort of moments or places of crisis. And so these sort of landscape forms became sort of a metaphor for areas that were sort of in danger or, from the virus, or were being sort of contaminated. Initially, I started making the little sculptural forms, which are polymer clay, to look more like the actual virus. And so I did some experiments, but I felt that, one, this was very literal, the way these images looked, and two, they just looked too nice. They looked too pretty. They looked like flowers. And I was just like, this virus is disgusting. You know, it doesn't deserve to look this pretty. So I started investigating other ways to create sort of this sort of anger and the sharpness that the virus, you know, sort of feels like, more metaphorically than what it actually looks like. And so these are all the pieces that I started making. And I usually would make these out of porcelain clay and fire them in the kilns, but not having access to the studio, I started using polymer clay, which is essentially Sculpey, and using my toaster oven, which is, you know, very DIY COVID style. But it did afford me a freedom to work with a lot of colors. And I was attaching these to little pins and then baking them. And then Lisa was continuing to work as printing while I was making the little sculptural forms, but it got to a tipping point where I couldn't make enough forms fast enough. So I actually recruited Lisa to start making some forms as well. And then we were trying to figure out, well, how are we going to lay out the composition of this if we can't use the gallery? Normally we would use maybe the college gallery, and we couldn't. So we used her basement, and she luckily had a nice gray floor, which was sort of similar to the wall that we wanted to use. And we just started laying out the composition together. And it was the first time we'd actually been able to really work together on the whole project. And then at one point, while we were laying it out, we lost power. And it was like the first time we actually got to collaborate, and then we lost power. So this image is actually taken in the dark, where we had like lanterns to try to see what we were working on. So, I mean, it was like the world was against us trying to get together to create this thing. And then finally, we were able to come and install the piece at the Arvada Center. All the printmaking plates are mounted to styrofoam, and I didn't include those process images because it's not that interesting, but they are all floating off of the wall and Velcroed to the wall and composed based on what our layout was in her basement, but definitely changed as we were working on it. So this image is of me pinning in some white forms, and I don't have very many images of this, but every one of the forms on the wall represent a death from COVID-19 in the state of Colorado. So when Lisa and I first installed the piece, the red, pink, and green forms were 1,500 deaths. And since then, I have added in white, and Lisa has helped me add them as well, 500 more pins representing 500 more deaths. So if you go see the exhibition, the work is changing. And so wherever there is white forms, that will represent new deaths since the installation. So it'll continue to change until November. I have 200 more that I'm coming to add, which is incredibly sad.
Okay, thank you, Katie and Lisa. So Novel Landscape captures a historical event that we are all going through and reflects our process of tracking data as we hope to find remedies and as we cope with this major change in our lives. So thank you, Katie and Lisa. Martha Russo has degrees in biology, psychology, and art. She's known for her large-scale ceramic installations, and she teaches at the University of Colorado Boulder. Tina Suszynski is an art educator and artist known for her ceramics, and her daughter, Anna Suszynski, is a poet and senior editor for Friction Poetry Journal. Emma Hardy is known for her large-scale sculptural illusionistic installations. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, everybody. It has been absolutely inspiring to hear about how everyone has maneuvered through this challenging time. And I kind of love Katie, like the toaster oven, brilliant, right? And I feel like as listening to everybody, Tina and Anna and Emma and I, we were all in the same boat. We actually never all got together until 2 weeks before the piece came together. And it was a pretty fast track. So what we thought we'd do today, because we've had a lot of questions about, like, how much does the cake weigh? And things like that. We're gonna run you through some process images, and really our main initial inspiration was to just celebrate all the women that came before us to get the vote and have made it easy for us in so many ways. Together, when I was invited, I really wanted to, one of the things I love that Anna's done here, Anna Kay's done here, is, you know, make the pond bigger and bigger and get as many people, you know, the energy together and to keep us moving in a way that we can affect change. And I wanted to invite Tina. We'd never worked together. And I also wanted to work with artists that I've never collaborated with in different genres. And Tina said, hey, my daughter's a writer. Let's get her together on it, which we thought was fabulous. And I've worked a number of times with Emma Hardy and am always inspired by how she puts things together. And we wanted to make a big cake. And we thought Emma would be a priceless person to have on it. Unfortunately, Anna and Emma are not going to be able to join us, so we're just going to power through and have them in spirit. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen with you all. And let's make a cake. Okay. So our initial inspiration came from Anna. She did a bunch of research, and we wanted to really celebrate the women of Colorado, and she came across this article in High Country News, December 13th, 1893, and the title was Western Women Wild with Joy, which became the title of our piece. And basically, Western women in Colorado they were much more outlandish than what was going on in the eastern part of the country. And if you read the article, it's kind of interesting because of sort of the equal footing of running ranches. Women felt like they were on more firm ground with what men were doing. And so we took that inspiration and we thought about, like, gosh, think about the layers, the time that this has taken for us to get the vote. And that, of course, is just white women to get the vote. And it really is 150 years of women doing all sorts of things to try to get the attention and try to get that, you know, seriousness of getting the vote. And we likened it to geologic years. We likened it to like the layers of time. And we wanted to sort of express that in some way. We also wanted to give credence to the recent movements and the recent, you know, the pink pussy hats and what's come out of the marches. And we started to just think about the different types of clothing that women have worn over the years. So this is where Tina came in, and she drew up this great sketch and said, well, what about a cake that has lots of layers? So Tina's gonna run us through, like, here's our first meeting and kind of our only meeting together with Anna and Susan in Tina's studio. And then Tina ran with it. Here's what she did.
So we here we are squished in that little space, pre-COVID. We're not wearing masks.
Yeah.
So we decided that we would use the clothing the progression of clothing. We simplified that progression. We started with dresses and skirts, and then progressed through pants. And at the top of the cake are a lot of jeans, because I think Western women wear a lot of jeans. And so we decided to dip them into porcelain. And at first we expected to fire all these pieces, which would have required sort of a different way of dipping, but as we're finishing, it would have affected how much clay we put on a piece. But as we started to see these layers build, we decided that we really liked to see the clothing. And if we had fired it, the clothing would have gone away. It would have been a sort of pure white level layers. So we made this decision via Zoom because the coronavirus had hit, and decided not to fire our dresses, our clothing. And I just laid it all out. There's a bunch of, you can see, a lot of space to lay out this clothing and cut it, because I had this notion that it had to be, the layers had to really reflect it, you know, the cake had to reflect the true layers on both sides. So I spent some time with Anna, was hunkering down with us for COVID, so she got to weigh in once in a while, but just dipping that clothing, laying out, cutting it, took a while. Finally got enough layers to drive it up to Ward, Colorado, up the mountain.
This was the first day we had all met each other. Like, Anna had never met Emma. I mean, it was just,
none of us had met.
We were just flying by the seat of our pants, really, and trying to amass material so we could start to make the cake. So Emma lives in Jamestown, which is close to where we live up in the mountains. And we basically met one day and said, what do you have? And what do you have? And here we go. And so now like, Tina had made the slice of the cake solid, but we knew that would be way too heavy. That the slice alone weighs 90 pounds, and to make a cake 4 feet wide would just be too much. So basically, again, taking what we got from our studios, and we did one run to Home Depot because we were kind of chicken to go. We started concocting this cake with all sorts of crazy materials, and just kind of having a ball, being like, oh, Emma's like, I've got this foam. I think that will work to help us get the frosting to stick. And so here we are. We've made the cake. We're starting to get ready now to understand the frosting. Emma had found this fabulous recipe online that involved flour, glue, cornstarch, mineral oil, a little bit of lightweight compound, and we started whirring it up, adding some color. Now I'm in heaven because all of this goop is just fun. And then pasting on this frosting that we're hoping will work. We're not even quite sure if it'll crack off or not. Doing all sorts of things to make sure that it doesn't crack apart when it starts to settle in and shrink. And now we're starting to make the cake plate, you know, finding different materials to do that. Here's the plate for the cake itself. And then Tina was our expert calligrapher and pretty much graphic designer to put all of the lettering onto the cake. Here she is. And then my favorite part was Anna and Tina came up. And Tina, you want to just tell them about like what Anna did with the poem and getting some writing on the cake?
Well, Anna was watching all these, we were Zooming once in a while and just catching up and watching how Emma and Martha were putting the cake together and discussing the ideas for the poem. But Anna was sort of building the poem as she was watching everything happen. And then she started to see all these products that we were pulling out. I love this porcelain that we use that Martha introduced me to. Is called spleth. I just think the word spleth is great. And she just decided, she had a poem in mind, but she decided to incorporate our process in the poem. And then you see the poem in the Arvada Center. It's pretty long, so we decided that we needed to allude to it on the cake. And there it is, written with caulking, yeah,
which we had a lot of in the house, and the mirror was like, well, this will be perfect.
Yeah. So, and then painted, and then we picked the couple of lines that we wanted to be on it, and then Martha and Emma had to apply those words right at the right time, which was like just perfect, so that it was part of the cake. And to plan it with the slice was, it was fun. We chose words. I don't know if anybody appreciates the way we chose the words, but we chose words we thought would be kind of fun on their own, intriguing, make people think about what this poem really is about or what it's saying. And then we had the hat trouble. Go ahead, Martha, you tell.
Yeah, then what we wanted to do is collect 100 hats from people, friends, or people in the neighborhood. So we amassed these different hats, and we had this idea of piling them all on top of each other, and they just weren't looking good. And here's my daughter, Odelia, who said, just make them look like raspberries, Mom. What's the big deal? And it was perfect. And again, like, you know, if it weren't for COVID and Odelia, our daughter, being stranded at home, she's out and about doing her thing. So there's all these little synchronistic things that came together. So here we are, we figured that out, we got those on. We actually invited our neighborhood to come and take a look. There were a lot of people who donated hats. It was the first time most people had been out. It was like being let out of jumping out of a cake, honestly. Emma and I we were like excited because we couldn't believe things were working and staying together. And Anna and Tina were just fabulous, coming back and forth. And then, of course, getting the cake there is no easy task. And with the help of Emily and Colin and their staff, we popped it into place, put a little more icing on it, and just were really excited to see the whole thing finally come together. But I have to say, it's the quickest, biggest sculpture any of us have made in such a short amount of time. And it really, I feel like it went with sort of the spirit and the courage of, not that this was as courageous as the wild women of the West who came before us and all the women in our country who fought to get us suffrage, but I feel like it was in the spirit of what it must have taken early on, like just trying to figure out what to do with what they had and just punch it through. And we are just exceptionally thankful for being in the show with all of you. And it's just an incredible special thank to Anna Kay and Emily and Colin and the whole Arvada Center for, the flexibility and the agility of moving through this virus and persevering to get the show up. I know, like, we all just needed it to make something, and it kept your mind off of those horrible numbers coming in and the suffering. But, and it's, of course, not to make light of any of that, but we really wanted to have a celebratory piece that was lighthearted, but had content that gave a nod to all the women that have come before us. So I want to thank,
the hats. Let's go to the hats for 1 second.
Sure.
We put the call out we wanted to have 150 hats. We wanted to have a hat for every year of the vote. And we put a call out for the hats right before COVID. And of course, you know, wasn't enough time for people to respond, but it was really amazing that we did get the hats that we got, and I got a few in the mail, and met some new people, picking up some hats. And so we didn't destroy anyone's hats making the cake. No hats were harmed, except the ones that we made. And so that bowl down there in the corner are all the hats that people donated to us that, you know, that they want to keep, that they're going to get back one day. But we felt like that made this sculpture include a lot more than just us, and we enjoyed that little aspect of it as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging on and listening. I know we've had a good long night of talking art, which is always fun. So thank you.
It looks like you have one question from Sammy asking if the frosting is archival.
Oh, good question. You know, it actually is. It's like bulletproof. It's not going anywhere. It's shrunk a little bit, which we were sort of surprised about, like off the plate. But, you know, our hope is right now, we're hoping to move it to a new location in Denver, to just continue the celebration. And then we've got a few lines out for, in DC at the Women's Museum. We're hoping they might want to collect it, or we can give it to them, because we just don't want to stick it in storage. We really want people to enjoy it. So that's what we're working on. So yes, indeed, it is archival. It's not gonna get nasty over the next couple weeks.
I love that we can end on a celebratory piece such as yours, but also be aware of all the work that needs to be done moving into the future. And I have a quote that I want to share. Since your work is so heavily about the vote, this is from Michelle Obama.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you've got to vote, vote, vote. That's it. That's the way we move forward. That's how we make progress for ourselves and for our country. And thank you so much for joining us for our artist talk. And thank you to all the artists for showing us your processes and methods and inspiring us with your creativity and your collaborations, because collaboration is not easy. It's a challenge, and you all did such a beautiful job with it through this pandemic, through these challenging times. And I hope everybody gets a chance to see the exhibition at the Arvada Center. Again, it's up through November 8th. And it's always better to see the work in person. So our next artist talk is on October 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. Keep an eye out for more information at our website and the Arvada Center's website. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope that you all have a fabulous evening.